Welcome back to Quick Films. Today I'm going to explain the first 6 episodes of the American psychological horror thriller series called Hannibal, released in the year 2013. Spoilers ahead. Like the video and subscribe. Will Graham is a special investigator and a teacher at the FBI Academy who has a special ability to assume the point of view of a killer as well as empathize with them. This ability, while it saves lives, has a haunting effect on Graham. One day, Jack Crawford, head of the Behavioral Science Unit of the FBI, approaches Graham to help catch a kidnapper who has abducted 8 girls from different campuses in the last 8 months. The criminal has covered all of his tracks and abducted his victims on a Friday, so they wouldn't be reported missing till Monday. The latest victims is a liver cancer patient Elise from St. Cloud State University who was supposed to go home and house sit for appearance over the weekend and feed the cat. Graham speculates that all first 7 victims are probably dead because the kidnapper can't keep them all around. Given that all the victims have roughly similar appearance and measurement, Graham speculates that it's not about all of these girls, it's just about one of them. Graham and Crawford then visit Elise's home, and after learning that Elise's cat didn't look hungry when her parents got home after staying away for the weekend, Graham infers that Elise probably returned home and fed the cat before she was abducted. Crawford immediately declares Elise's home a crime scene, and Graham goes to inspect her room. Lo and behold, he finds Elise's dead body lying in her bed. FBI forensics expert Beverly Katz finds antler velvet in Elise's wound, but her cause of death is found to be strangulation. Since antler velvet is rich in nutrients and promotes healing, Graham speculates that the killer put it in there to heal Elise's ribs, which she broke during the struggle in an effort to undo as much damage as she could. Graham calls it an apology. The killer also put her corpse back where he killed her because for some reason he couldn't show her he loved her like he did with his other victims who haven't been found. The killer probably loves one of these girls, and by association, he has some form of love for others. Katz also finds metal scrapings on the victim's clothes, hinting that it was the work of a plumber or tool worker. Elise's liver was also removed and put back in her body. Graham guesses that the killer perhaps wanted to eat the organ but didn't after he learned that Elise had liver cancer. The FBI names him the Shrike. Crawford, using an unstable Graham's help in the case, attracts the attention of FBI psychiatrist Dr. Alana Bloom, who advises the former to hire a psychologist to keep an eye on him. Taking her advice, Crawford seeks the help of Dr. Hannibal Lecter, who's also an excellent sketch artist. Hannibal studies Graham's psychological profile and makes personal comments upsetting Graham. The next day, a journalist named Freddie Lowndes uses her police contact to find details of the case and publishes it on her website, much to Graham's dismay. Later that day, the FBI finds the dead body of another young woman named Casey Boyle naked in a field mounted on top of a stag head. The victim's lungs are missing, and a quick investigation reveals the victim's lungs were taken out when she was still alive. Graham quickly concludes that this is a copycat cannibal because Elise's killer loved his victims and wouldn't disrespect them like this. The original cannibal had a place to kill and had no interest in humiliating his victims. Graham predicts that the Shrike probably has a house or two with an antler room. He also has a daughter the same age as the other girls and with the same features and measurements. She's also an only child leaving home, and the killer can't stand the thought of losing her and perhaps his original intended target. On the other hand, the copycat killer is an intelligent and sadist psychopath, Graham notes. The scene then cuts to the copycat killer's home, and lo and behold, it's revealed to be Dr. Hannibal Lecter himself chopping and cooking the victim's lungs. The next day, Hannibal shows up at Graham's door with breakfast as a way to apologize to him for psychoanalyzing him without his permission. Graham accepts his apology and eats the breakfast, unaware that he's consuming the lungs of a human. Hannibal then asks Graham if he has started to mentally reconstruct the copycat killer's fantasies. It seems that the deranged psychiatrist imitated the Strike so he could get Graham to analyze his psyche and give him some insight on why he's the way he is. Using the metal shred found in Elise's clothes, the FBI narrows down the construction site and hence tracks down the Shrike, who is revealed to be a pipe threader named Garrett Jacob Hobbs. However, before Graham and the FBI could raid Hobbs' house, Hannibal covertly alerts the latter. Hobbs immediately kills his wife and holds his daughter Abigail hostage. When the FBI arrives, Graham storms inside and forces him to surrender, but he slits his daughter's throat, forcing Graham to shoot him dead. The girl is fatally injured, but she's rushed to the hospital and survives. The next day, the FBI finds Hobbs' cabin in a nearby forest where they find antlers used by him to murder his victims. After assessing everything, Graham and Crawford become sure that Hobbs couldn't have hunted his victims all by himself. The movie then cuts to the house of Freddy, who had managed to get to the cabin before the FBI and photographed the place for her website. Some days later, the FBI investigates 9 bodies found partially buried in the middle of a forest. They're at various stages of decaying and well fertilized with a high nutrient compost. The victims were buried but kept alive intravenously as the fungus ate their bodies away. Freddy also shows up at the crime scene posing as the parent of the children who found the bodies and clicks pictures and finds information about Graham. She watches him closely, observing the bodies and mentally recreating the crime. Graham starts having hallucinations and begins to see Hobbs everywhere. When he tells Hannibal about it, the latter wonders if Graham thinks Hobbs is a victim. Afterwards, the two discuss the killer, who they named the farmer. Hannibal notes that the structure of fungus which the bodies were covered with mirrored the structure of the human brain, an intricate web of connections. Graham wonders if the farmer admires their ability to connect the way human minds can't. Freddy, who had followed Graham to Hannibal's office, eavesdrops on the entire conversation. After Graham leaves, Hannibal catches her red-handed and makes her delete the recordings. Soon, it's revealed that the bodies were buried in a highly concentrated mixture of hardwoods, shredded newspaper, and pig poop, perfect for growing mushrooms and other fungi. Moreover, all victims were diabetic, and the farmer was feeding them sugar solution to feed the mushroom, and as a result, all the victims eventually died of kidney failure. Graham predicts that the killer most likely induced diabetic comas before putting his victims in the ground. Concluding that the farmer must be a pharmacist or a doctor owing to his extensive knowledge of biology, the FBI tracks a pharmacist named Alden Stamets, whose 10 diabetic customers have disappeared so far after filing prescriptions for insulin. The FBI manages to rescue his latest victim, but he manages to escape. On Stamets' workstation's browser history, the FBI finds Freddy's new article about the mushroom case and Graham's mental condition. This naturally enrages Crawford, and he threatens to indict her for obstructing justice and warns her against writing about Graham. Meanwhile, Graham keeps visiting Hobbs' daughter Abigail in the hospital, eagerly waiting for her to wake up from coma. The next day, Freddy's informant shows up at her door to confront her for getting him suspended from his job. Shortly later, Stamets appears and shoots the man dead. He then asks Freddy about Graham and the Hobbs case before leaving. When the FBI arrives, Freddy tells Crawford that Stamets was talking about people having the same properties as fungus. Stamets feels that Graham understands him and he wants to help him connect with Abigail by burying her. Crawford alerts Graham about Stamets, but the latter manages to kidnap Abigail from her bed. Fortunately, Graham finds and confronts him. Stamets tells him that humans evolved from mycelium and he wanted to introduce Abigail to the concept. He adds that if you walk through a field of mycelium, they know you are there and they reach out to you. The spores reach for you as you walk by. He claims that if Graham had let him plant Abigail, she would have reached for him too. A flashback then shows Abigail hunting deers with her father. She has also been to his antler cabin. Abigail doesn't like eating the deer that she herself kills. However, Hobbs tells her that you must honor your prey by eating them, otherwise it's just murder. The scene cuts back to the present and Abigail wakes up from a deep coma. With the remains of Hobbs' 7 other victims still missing, Crawford is under intense pressure and he believes that Abigail is an accomplice of her cannibal father. However, Dr. Bloom keeps him from interrogating her just yet. As usual, Freddy gets to Abigail before the FBI and she provokes her against Graham, the man who killed her father. After talking to Freddy, Abigail insists on returning home. Graham later confronts Freddy and threatens Freddy. However, this does little to deter her and she meets with Cassie Boyle's brother Nicholas. She tries to find information about the case and in exchange tells him about Abigail coming out of coma. Graham and Dr. Bloom decided to grant Abigail her wish and take her back home. There, Abigail asks Graham about his ability to get in the mind of people like her father, while he asks her about the last phone call Hobbs answered before he went on the rampage. Graham correctly deduces that the untraceable phone call warned Hobbs about the raid and it was probably the copycat killer. Abigail's friend Melissa also visits her and Graham gives her some time to catch up with her. Suddenly, Nicholas shows up at the property and confronts Abigail about her role in his sister's gruesome murder. As Graham and others arrive, Melissa manages to fend Nicholas away with a stone. Hannibal notices the stone with Nicholas' DNA and covertly hides it. The next day, Abigail visits her father's cabin with Graham and others. There, she reveals that Hobbs used every single part of his prey either for food or for making glues, pillows, butter, and so on. Before slitting her throat, Hobbs told her that he killed all those girls so he wouldn't have to kill her. Suddenly, blood starts dripping from the attic, and when Graham goes upstairs to inspect, he comes across Melissa's dead body. The FBI immediately suspects Nicholas and fears Abigail could be the next target. As Graham investigates the crime scene, Hannibal and Dr. Bloom drive a traumatized Abigail back to her home. When they give her some space to collect himself, Nicholas shows up and tries to explain to her that he didn't kill Melissa. However, Abigail tries to run away, and Nicholas tries to stop him, prompting a scared Abigail to stab him to death. Hannibal watches it all transpire and stops Dr. Bloom from seeing Abigail kill Nicholas by knocking her out. Abigail explains herself, saying she acted in self-defense, but Hannibal tells her that the FBI won't believe her and see her as an accessory to the crimes of her father. Abigail panics, and Hannibal offers to help her by hiding the dead body. Hannibal then lies to Crawford that Nicholas came for Abigail and attacked Dr. Bloom, but he fended him away. It's also revealed that Hannibal had framed Nicholas for Cassie's murder by planting his DNA from the stone on her body. Later, a traumatized Abigail runs away from the hospital and meets Hannibal. Seeing his nonchalance towards Nicholas's death, Abigail figures out that Hannibal is the copycat killer. He doesn't deny it and explains that he's not a serial killer and he just made a mistake just like her. The two then agree to keep each other secret. While dealing with nightmares and increasingly identifying more and more with Hobbs, Graham begins working on a new murder case. The Turner family, consisting of Karen and Roger Turner and their two children, are found slaughtered in their home. The couple also had a third child named Jesse, but he disappeared last year. The Turner family were executed simultaneously, with the exception of Mrs. Turner, who was killed last. There are no signs of forced entry, so the FBI predicts that the family knew the killer. Graham also regularly attends therapy with Hannibal, and it's revealed that both of them never had parent figures in their life. Hannibal points out that Graham has a lot in common with Abigail, and maybe that's the reason why he sympathizes with her. Meanwhile, Dr. Bloom spends more and more time with Abigail and increasingly grows sympathetic towards her. She insists on keeping her in clinical treatment. However, Hannibal wants to release her. When he's not mind-twisting Graham, Hannibal continues to haunt humans and feeds everyone around him that meet without their knowledge. After a thorough investigation, the FBI finds 4 foreign footprints in the crime scene, one of which the FBI suspects belongs to Jesse, who they believe executed his family. Another footprint is found to be of a missing boy named Connor Frist, and much like Jesse, Connor has 2 siblings, and he too disappeared from his home about a year ago. When the FBI raids Connor's family's home, they come across dead bodies of his entire family. They also find Connor's dead body in the fireplace. It's revealed that Mrs. Frist was also killed last, but she was shot at by 2 different shooters from different angles. Graham deduces that just like Jesse, Connor too came to finish off his family, and when the first shot couldn't kill his mother and she started convulsing, he panicked and couldn't put another bullet in her. Consequently, he was immediately disowned and executed by his tribe. The scene then cuts to a restaurant where Jesse and 2 other children named CJ and Chris are having lunch with a woman. It turns out the woman kidnaps children and trains them to kill their family so they could fully accept her as their mother. The FBI matches the second bullet that killed Mrs. Frist to the bullets used to murder the family of CJ. During one of his regular appointments with Hannibal, Graham reveals that he had bought a fishing gear as a gift for Abigail, but decided against giving it to her. Graham also goes on a rant and partially blames the underage boys for abandoning their family. Graham eventually figures out that a woman must be involved in executing the families. Just in time, the FBI sees the footage of Chris with the unidentified women at a store and immediately raids his family's home, saving everyone and apprehending the women. During the course of the next few days, it's revealed that Crawford's wife is suffering from liver cancer, but she has kept the news from him because he hardly has any time for her. After being impressed by Hannibal's skills during a dinner, she starts consulting him. Meanwhile, overwhelmed by the gory cases he's working on, Graham starts sleepwalking. He too keeps this from Crawford and seeks Hannibal's help. Hannibal indirectly blames Crawford for Graham's worsening condition and instigates the latter against him. Soon, the FBI starts working on the murder of an identified couple who were found dead in their motel room. The couple's backs were skinned and draped to resemble angel wings, and their bodies were held up by fishing strings, bowing and praying towards the bed. The killer slept on the bed and threw up at night. Graham speculates that the killer is self-righteous, and Hins couldn't stomach what he did. However, he thinks he's somehow elevating his victims by transforming them into angels. The killer's vomit reveals that he has a brain tumor. In the next few sessions, Hannibal continues to turn Graham against Crawford. It seemingly works, and Graham lashes out at Crawford when they find the angel maker's next victim. However, Graham immediately realizes his mistake and apologizes to him. In the crime scene, the FBI finds the killer's severed testicles, and Graham concludes that the angel maker is trying to become one himself because angels don't have genitalia. The FBI eventually identifies the couple murdered earlier as Roger and Marilyn Brunner. They're career criminals and were driving a stolen car. The latest victim is also revealed to be a convicted felon. Graham concludes that the killer is identifying criminals and making angels out of them. It doesn't take the FBI long to identify the angel maker using the National Cancer Database. It's revealed to be a truck driver, Elliot Buddish, who disappeared 1 month after he was diagnosed with cancer. Elliot's wife reveals that he had a near-death experience at a farm when he was a child, and the fireman told him that he must have a guardian angel protecting him. The FBI immediately head to the farm, where they find Elliot's dead body in the angel form. After catching Elliot, Graham admits to Crawford that he can't keep working on these gruesome cases because of the effect it has on him, upsetting the latter. Crawford also finds out about his wife's cancer and her clandestine therapy sessions with Hannibal. He confronts her at Hannibal's office. They apologize to each other for their mistakes and promise to be there for each other. Soon, the FBI's attention turns towards a prisoner named Abel Gideon at a psychiatric hospital. Gideon was a medical doctor, and one day he hurt himself in a cell and rushed to be treated. There, he removes his handcuffs and brutally murders the night nurse before being arrested again. The hospital's head, Dr. Chilton, tells Crawford that Gideon was a well-behaved prisoner for 2 straight years, and therefore security around him was slightly relaxed. Dr. Chilton claims that the removal of organs and the abdominal mutilations of the nurse make it look like the work of an infamous serial killer named Chesapeake Ripper, who has evaded justice and has been missing in action for the last 2 years. Although Gideon was admitted to the hospital 2 years ago after he impulsively killed his wife and her family, Crawford finds it hard to believe that Gideon is the Chesapeake Reaper because the latter was methodical and meticulous. It's also revealed that the Chesapeake Reaper also murdered Crawford's agent, Miriam Regina, 2 years ago. Crawford blames himself for her death because he assigned her to the Chesapeake Reaper task force. Overwhelmed, Crawford talks to Hannibal about Miriam and his sick wife. That night, Crawford gets a call, and on the other end, someone plays a recording of Miriam for help before Chesapeake Ripper killed her 2 years ago. The next day, Crawford tries to locate the caller the next day, but without success. It's revealed that it was a recording of Miriam pleading to Crawford when Crawford is assured that it was the serial killer trying to let him know that he's still out there. Therefore, he decides to seek the help of Freddy to lure the Ripper into revealing himself. On Crawford's word, Freddy runs a story claiming that Gideon is the Chesapeake Ripper. It works, and Crawford gets a similar call from his own bedroom where someone plays the same audio recording. The FBI finds Miriam's fingerprint on the phone and a strand of her blonde hair on the pillow. However, Gideon continues to insist that he's the Chesapeake Ripper. One night, Hannibal invites Dr. Chilton and Dr. Bloom for dinner where they discuss the case. Seeing Dr. Chilton keep insisting that Gideon is telling the truth, Dr. Bloom begins to suspect if he cursively persuaded Gideon that he's the Ripper. Hannibal comes to his defense, but later indirectly lets him know that he's aware that he planted the suggestion in Gideon's mind, which Dr. Chilton doesn't deny. Crawford gets another call, and this time it leads him to an abandoned building. Inside, they find a phone in someone's severed hand. Later, Crawford sits down with Hannibal and tells him how he had started hoping that Miriam was still alive. A flashback then shows Miriam visiting Hannibal, who was once a practicing physician, to discuss one of his former patients and victims of the Ripper. There, Miriam inadvertently comes across a troubling drawing that indicates that Hannibal is the Chesapeake killer. It turns out, after being exposed, Hannibal strangled Miriam to death.